something a little bit different. Instead of a time lapse of one of my pieces, I'm going to share with you in real time one of my paintings, something that I did today. My intention with this is a little series that is just basically going to be some studies. Instead of just working through my process on my iPad, which is what I like to use as a sketchbook, I am going to work through some new ideas actually on my canvases. So I bought a bunch of small little cheap canvases because I find if when I'm working on expensive exhibition canvases, I get all caught up in my head that this has to be something perfect, and I do what I always do. I want to push myself out of that box. I want to learn some new techniques. I want to get some new colors into my palette, and I just want to start trying some new stuff. There's so many incredible artists online that I absolutely love their work, and I'm never really brave enough to push myself when I have a special canvas in front of me. So I have some ideas I want to work through, and I thought, well, why not do a little series on YouTube? This might pressure me into, having to get these pieces done and out there to work quickly. I find if I work quick and I don't think too much about it, I sometimes am a little braver because I don't value it, I guess. What I'll do with each canvas is let you know my intention, and you can judge for yourself if I've achieved it or not. I'm not going to give you a timeline right now or how often I'm going to do this. I'm just going to promise that it's going to be a series, and I will share them with you no matter what, even if they go bad. I will show you, because you need to see that everything that artists put online is their best work. We show our best selves, just like our profile pictures are always our best selves. Well, I'm going to show you my not so best self as well. I promise. I think I promise. I will try and promise that. It will take a lot of nerve to show you something that I do not like. But the good news is today I like what I did. I had two things I really wanted to achieve, and they both came through. So enjoy and get a coffee because it's going to take a little while. It's my bird. Her name is Sugar. She bites. And that's my bird. She likes to nap in my hand while I'm working most of the time. Makes it fairly inconvenient when you work with your hands. Her name is Sugar. She's a conure, and she's about 17 years old. This is a color palette I've wanted to try for a while. I refer to it as my rainbow painting. Normally my paintings have colors everywhere. I plan my palettes, but they take on their own life as my painting progresses. So I figured that it would be fairly challenging to paint this idea of a rainbow painting where you get all the colors in the rainbow in order, ranging from one side of the piece to the other. I thought it could be a little bit tricky to do because I like to let the colors get away from me, really. This is what led to creating this study. I find when I term it a study, I don't get quite as anxious and nervous about it, and therefore I relax and I usually do a better job. And I figure if I can create a study that has my rainbow idea in it and it's successful, then I won't be quite so worried about painting it. Okay, I'm getting carried away with my color mixes. I love mixing colors. I could mix colors all day long. Almost love it more than I love painting. This is just a study, it's not a painting. I don't want to get too carried away with my color mixes because I want the study to be quick and successful, and I don't want to get carried away using too much color. I don't mind when I paint the actual painting to get carried away with more color than the study has. The whole point of today is to get a successful study. I want to have the range of colors that I see in my sketch. I'm pre-mixing some ranges of values so that I don't have to stop and mix as I go. I like to just get into flow. I normally work with mixed colors. I don't often work with straight out of tube colors, but because this painting is rainbow, I feel like it's quite appropriate to use the colors straight out of the tube because they're so beautifully saturated, and there's already quite a variety here, and this is just a study. I would use a wider variety for my main painting, and then therefore I would have some variety in each color in the larger painting. I rarely ever worry about cross-contaminating my colors. I find that it pretty much works whatever I do. Cross-contaminating kind of helps them talk to each other a little bit better and changes the tone a bit, changes the hue. Some greens. This color is just, this green is just too warm. So the purpose of this study is to push myself to try some new things out of my comfort zone, not radically changing any main element of my style, but just trying a few things that have been on my mind. So one of those things is new colors. Now they aren't drastically different, but just some slight changes to see what I could create with them. So the next step will be drawing on my canvas, and then we'll get started. Now I'm going to draw straight onto my canvas. This is another aspect of my study that I'm going to do a little differently than I normally do. Another thing I'm going to do differently today, as I'm pushing myself to work a little differently, is how I'm going to begin my painting. Normally I cover the whole canvas before I draw anything, but today I'm going to draw onto the bare canvas first, and I'm going to paint over top of my drawing. I don't always begin with a drawing. Oftentimes I'll just use my paintbrush and start painting right away. I really want to be able to focus today on my colors, so I want to have the drawing set out so I don't have to think about it. I feel like that's the best way for me to succeed, is to have an outline of my face, because faces are difficult, and especially this one has got a special angle to it. And if I get it drawn correctly, then I don't really have to think about that much more for the rest of my piece. I like using a big brush as long as I can. I suggest if you want to loosen up from a realism style to more impressionist, you need to use bigger brushes. I'm filling in some of these darker shadows. I'm going to do an entire base coat of blue, kind of like a monochromatic underpainting. So even though this may be a good challenge for me, I am recognizing right now that I do not like starting from a white canvas. I much prefer covering my canvas with a ground before I start. Sometimes you wonder, are you doing things the right way? Are you doing things the best way that you can for what you want to achieve? And now I realize an underpainting is definitely the best way for me to start. I definitely succeed in a better underpainting when I have a ground, and I think she looks rather terrible. So that's fine. It's here nor there, really. It's kind of like an underpainting in my mind. So normally if you've watched any of my time lapses, you'll see that I do a ground on my canvas where I cover it in colors. And then once the ground dries, I go back in and I create this underpainting, either a drawing, an outline, or an underpainting with a brush. So I just wanted to see if I could do that differently today, and I did it differently, but I don't think that it really served any purpose for me in what I want to do, so we'll see. All right, well, number 1 of my study challenge is done, and you heard what I had to say about that. So number 2 of my study challenge is going to be approach this methodically. I've created this sketch on my iPad of the colors I want to use, and I'm going to attempt to just lay them out. I've mixed the colors I think that will work, and I'm just going to lay them out onto the canvas as I see them. Now, I don't have a very good underpainting. She's not very good at all. We'll see how this goes. Part of why I want to challenge myself in this direction is because the technique I use mainly is tons of layers, tons and tons of layers. And I know that there's benefit to layers. What I love about the layering is the color and the texture and the depth it creates. I'm not going to give up layering my work and using that technique at all. But what I want to see is just, can I do a painting with less paint? Now this is a study, so I'm not overly anxious about it being perfect and well layered and texturized and all those things. Because this is a study, I'm not too worried about having all those elements that I prefer having in my completed paintings. So I have that less pressure on myself right away. But I do want to see how it moves into my paintings if I can push myself to create a painting in less layers. You never know what it'll open up in your regular work when you try something new. In university, one of the projects that we had to do, I feel like quite often in different classes, was to recreate paintings of the great masters. And what that was we could just go to the library and choose any painting we wanted, any artist that we wanted from, in the days of Michelangelo. And we had to go and get the exact mediums that he used and the paper, everything to be exactly the same, and then recreate the exact piece of art. And it was really a great way to learn. You got to use things that you wouldn't normally choose to use, because we all kind of stick with our favorites when it comes to our art, I think. A lot of people do anyways. I do. So it was a great challenge to try new things. In my study series, that's what I am going to push myself to do. Things that I see other artists do that I admire, I am going to work really hard to bring in some of those aspects, some of those techniques, mediums, different things that they do into my own work. So the study series is really about that, just taking things I see my favorite artists doing online and seeing if I can do it as well. You never know. So the purples here are quite dark. I'm working my way into the light. I don't really have a lot of red included in this little transition in the rainbow. I'm not going to take it. I'm just really having to refrain from taking it into places that the sketch is not. Now, I don't have, all my values are not mixed properly, exactly as they are in the sketch. This color is really adding some brightness to her. It's kind of nice. It's hard sticking with this sketch. I really want to evolve her some more, but I also want to show this in real time on YouTube, and I want you to be able to watch me work. So I want to work quickly so that this video doesn't get too long. I think there's a lot of room for this color. This was like a lighter red that I saw around her nose, but I don't think there's a lot of use of that color. So I'm just going to keep working my way up. I'm going to put in a slightly more saturated red into these shadows a little bit. And move into the oranges. I'm going to lay the darker, this may not be dark enough, let's see. I'm going to lay the darker oranges first so that the brighter ones can go on top of it. I think I'm going to need to use some more blues up here for those lines. My brush stroke is, I refer to it as dry brush. I don't believe it's really a traditional dry brush technique. My brush is always damp, not completely wet, not completely dry. And I just lightly blot my paint on. This is kind of how I paint. When I did realism, of course, I use a lot of blending techniques. If you're a realist painter, you'll know that realism requires a lot of blending. And one of the ways I pushed myself out of that over the years is to force myself to not be allowed to blend. That's challenging, but it's become a habit now. It just required time, pushing yourself, if that's where you want to go. Of course, you don't have to go there, but if that's where you want to go, just requires some force feeding yourself to use a large brush and to not allow yourself to blend. And if you're new to that idea, you will find yourself blending against your own will. telling yourself you're not blending, and then when you look at your painting, all you'll see is blend work, because our mind wants to be in control and do the exact same thing it's always done. So my technique is to use as little blending as possible, and so I'm blotting and dry brushing quite a bit. Okay, that's an undertone of dark, so her whole face looks way darker than the sketch is. That's on purpose. I know that the values aren't correct, but I want to have the dark values laid before I put all the bright values on. I know that's kind of against what I said I was gonna do, but that's what I'm doing. See, this is my brain telling me it's not allowed to do anything new. I'm going into the lighter values now. I'm kind of stepping it up a few stops. And I'm still using my big brush, even though there's some finer details here around her eyes. I probably will go in and just put in a few details at the end with a smaller brush. I do see the rainbow coming out. I'm gonna go back and do another layer of color because I don't have enough tones in here. I can see that for sure. But I do see the rainbow coming out. It's making me think it's possible to create a rainbow painting. Well, I mean, it's definitely possible. It's possible for me to create a rainbow painting. Sometimes you think there's limits to what you can do, but you know what? There usually isn't. You can limit yourself, of course. There's nothing a little bit of practice and getting your brain to reevaluate some new paths. My old thinking is, work the entire piece. So when I have yellow on my brush, I want to put yellow everywhere, all over, get some highlights down here and create layers and layers and layers, which is what works for me in my regular paintings. So it's really difficult for me to refrain from that and at the same time be thinking of what I have to do to create the painting, to get the painting to work. So my mind is fighting, don't do it the old way. And then it's at the same time trying to say, do it this way. And it's tiring. Even though this is a little painting and it's coming together pretty quickly, and I'm not going to be spending tons of time here making it into a perfect piece, it's still really tiring. I can feel that, my brain working overtime. I guess it's, you're not able to enter into flow when you're in this type of a process. When you're in a learning process, when you're doing something new, it's very difficult to get into a flow state. One of the things about flow is the level of difficulty you should be using in your work if you want to enter into flow is about 4%. So I've been told. And right now, trying something new like this, the level of difficulty is definitely above 4% for me because I'm not doing my usual stuff. So flow is not going to happen. Therefore, my brain is feeling taxed. Maybe a good way to think about it is that my brain's getting a workout, which is good. It's the way you stay young, right? I'm adding in some of these lighter values now so I can see her shape a little bit better. The value is oops, that was black. How did that get on my brush? Dark green. Value is everything that makes a painting come alive. So mapping out the values, which is why a great underpainting helps you to succeed so much better. I didn't start with one, that's for sure. And I'm gonna post this online for everybody to see my failure. I'm gonna go back in now and add some of those dark blue values that are in her hair and in her neck. And then there's some of these little details in here, which if I had done a really great underpainting, I would have those values in there, but I don't, so I have to go back in and get them. So remember, this is a study. I am not going for perfection. Actually, what I'm gonna do now is turn off my color and turn on my reference. And I'm gonna put in my dark values rather than looking at how I sketch them. Definitely don't want to, when I'm doing a sketch, I don't want to get too stuck in the ways of a sketch. If I was doing my full exhibition painting, I wouldn't want to get stuck with the sketch. I use it as a reference, and then there's a point where I turn my sketch off because I don't want to get stuck with what I did. It's going to look quite different in real life than it will in a finished painting is going to look a lot different than your sketch, of course. You never want to get too stuck with the way your sketch was if you feel your painting going into a different direction. Now this study, I'm pushing myself to try a few new things. So I also don't want to go too far into my old directions. But I do want to make sure I don't get too stuck in that sketch. I spray my canvas like that. It helps your paint spread a little bit more. I use heavy body paints and I like them to go on thick most of the time. All right, I'm gonna get a little slightly smaller brush and do some of those details around her eyes and nose. I wanna be careful here not to get stuck in putting in lots of detail. I do like her colors. She has a major lack of detail. We'll see how we're gonna end this thing. Part of why I wanna go in right now and get these darker areas in her face is so that I can go back over with another layer of color and it'll create some more detail into the piece. And what'll happen is that those colors will cover up a lot of this dark because it's going to be a little bit too big, a little bit too dark. That's part of the loose style of not wanting every single brush stroke to put the painting in the exactly perfect place. I want the paint to move around. I want the features to be somewhat blurred. But I know that this is going to create a lot of dark, way too dark. And because I know that, I'm just going to trust myself. Trusting ourselves is so important as artists. Trust your instinct. Sometimes I get really impatient that my piece is not coming together quite quickly enough, and I freak out about it, and then I force it to come together before it's ready. Paintings always enter, well, my paintings, and I have heard other artists talk about this, they always enter an ugly stage. Another artist that I watched online said that his work begins in a beautiful simplicity and then it goes into chaos. And he is just spending the rest of the time bringing it back into that beautiful place of simplicity. And I thought that is exactly it. So you don't want to force it too quickly, or it may not come together with the depth and the message that it's supposed to carry. One thing I do a lot of is squint to check that the values are in their right places. This is a good time to kind of push those values a little bit because I know I'm going to go back over it. And now that I have these colors laid out, I don't even really have to go back to my color reference because I know now where the rainbow colors need to sit. I can kind of follow what I've done already. All right, I'm going to start with a new layer of color. Really want to get some greens in there. All the while reminding myself this is a study, not a complete painting. And I want to work fast. I want to push myself to work fast, a little looser than normal, and control my colors a little more than I normally do. Already this second layer is quite nice. Feels quite nice to me. It just deepens the piece, getting another layer on. Okay, I'm going to put some darker purple here as the green goes up into the purple. I actually took this rainbow color palette from a landscape artist who paints these beautiful clouds that are, you know, they have all the colors of the sunset in them. And the bottom of those paintings would be ground where he would have greens in there. And that's kind of why I have this green in her neck. So I'm not really doing a true colors of the rainbow piece. It's inspired by a very rainbow-esque landscape that I saw. In case you're wondering what I'm doing. See, I really want to bring, okay, I'm going to just show you. What I really want to do is bring this purpley pink down into her neck like this. That's what I would normally do if I was painting my regular style. But I want to keep these colors regulated, making them stay in their zone. Go back over that with some green. Regulate those colors. Probably realizing it's kind of why I didn't love realism, because you're very forced to put the colors in one area, figure out what color best represented that area, and you had to put it in. But the style that I enjoy painting in, I get to put colors, whatever colors I want, wherever I want. Now, I'm noticing that my change from green to purple to pink has kind of eroded a bit. You notice here how this nice pink colors are coming here. It's getting really flat. I'm going over some of these little darker areas with a dark red. So you can see there's depth there now, but as I put the red over it, it gives it some nice texture and life. I really want to give her the illusion of her age. And sometimes just having smaller strokes will allude to the wrinkles in her face. This is very wet on wet paint. This paint is very wet on wet right now. And I'm finding it'll just blend right in. So I'm wiping my brush off quite a bit onto paper towel. I feel like that's almost wasteful, but it's the only way to really get it to look right. Otherwise it blends in like that. Just blends right in and you don't really get much value difference. So don't be stingy with your paints. Get some nice differences in those purples now. I can feel myself kind of sinking into this painting like I'm going to spend the next 6 hours here. I have to get out of that mode and kind of speed myself up a little. I always like to check myself as I'm working, thinking, am I doing what I set out to do here, or am I getting pulled into some direction I really didn't want to get pulled in? I call it a rabbit hole for sure. Am I going down a rabbit hole I had no intention of going down? Kind of like when you're in public speaking, you're trying to stay on topic and all of a sudden you realize you are somewhere you never meant to go. And if I want to keep the rainbow mode going, I've got to stay focused. So there's not a lot of reds in here. I feel like it needs a little more red just to show that transition. Let's go back to our sketch. Yeah, there's not a lot of reds in there either. I think it's kind of that hot pink. It's that hot pink color that's showing that transition a bit better than what's showing up on mine. One downfall with sketching on an iPad is that it's very bright and you want to bring that brightness into your painting, but your painting is not illuminated from the back. So it's not going to look like it does on an iPad. So if you're new to using the iPad, you might want to consider if that's why when you're comparing your sketched painting to what you're creating on your canvas, that's going to look different for that reason. Never quite as brilliant. Okay, I'm going to work a little more on this transition now from red to the oranges to the yellows. What I'm doing here is kind of my normal process of slowly building the layers of value, which I didn't really want to be doing that on this painting. The oranges are definitely adding to this piece. It's not light enough in value, but I'll do some yellows. Work on her nose shape just a little more. It's just an elusive, quick brush stroke that brings these shapes together, but sometimes that one brush stroke can make it really not make any sense whatsoever. Or can bring it together into a perfect mark, into the perfect feature. Can be just one brush stroke away. It can mean the expression on a face can mean one tiny little touch of the brush. Quite often I have a face that's looking just a little bit angry. One brush stroke on the mouth or on the corner of the eye, and suddenly that face just has a look of delight. I constantly tell my students not to stress if something has gone wrong in one area of your painting, because you can fix it quite easily when you focus your attention there. All right, I'm starting to feel like she's really coming together now. I might go back over that with pink because I think that's interfering too much in my rainbow. Now that I'm kind of coming close to the end, I don't mind giving these these blotches of paint, really thick kind of blotches of paint on there to give it some texture and excitement. I want to bring the value of, I have to decide how much detail I want to put in her face and in her eyes. Reminding myself this is a study and this is where I'm supposed to be trying some new things. Would really want to push the abstract blur that I'm always going for.